Why I don't support QTPOC as a movement, or queer trans people of color. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and one of the things that I've casually mentioned in a few videos and have certainly talked about on the Gatriarchy streams is the QTPOC movement, or QTPOCs as they call themselves, and Q-tips as we call them as a joke. However, it occurred to me that outside of the LGBT, gay, queer, or otherwise intersectional feminist community, many people might not even know what the acronym QTPOC stands for. Thus, the best working definition I managed to find came from a university in Arizona, of all places, for whatever reason. What is QTPOC? QTPOC stands for Queer and Trans People of Color. Queer trans people of color experience marginalization at the intersection of race, ethnocentrism, xenophobia, queerphobia, and transphobia. As a result, QTPOC, especially youth, experience high rates of homelessness, poverty, and violence. Kinda true, kinda true. Even though the queer liberation movement was spurred by the work of poor and working class trans women of color, not true, not true. Go check out my video, Sylvia Rivera, The Feminist History of a Gay Stonewall Icon, and it will debunk a lot of that notion that supposedly queer and trans women of color did all the heavy lifting during Stonewall. That's just not true. It's literally a lie. But I'm going to move on. Today's LGBTQA plus movement is largely and unfairly dominated by white, upper and middle class, gay and lesbian communities. Okay, first of all, it's not really dominated. We were looking at this Stonewall report from London that mentioned that racial minorities are about twice as likely to go out to gay bars and queer spaces of any type than white people. So white people are actually underrepresented. But the other thing is that if they do have positions of power, why do we get to decide that that's unfair? They are the majority and they probably worked hard. But let's move on. At the same time, LGBTQA plus identity is often underrepresented within communities of color. In practicing a politics of liberation, whatever that is, it is vital to center the needs and experiences of Q-tips and other communities experiencing multiple forms of oppression. Okay. Why? But, okay, they link to some everyday feminism articles and a Huffington Post article. Yeah. Okay. Now, before I continue, I want to make it explicitly clear that I have absolutely no problem with the types of individuals that other individuals could bracket as being queer in some way, though I will say that if somebody wears the queer label as some sort of tribalistic badge in the current year, I probably won't want to be friends with them. I also have no problem with trans people, and I certainly don't have a problem with racial minorities, though I think it's pretty racist to call them all people of color, people of colored people, as if everybody from Nigerian to Japanese gets to basically be called colored due to their shared frustrations with the white majority in Western nations or whatever. However, what I have a problem with is the people who feel compelled to use this acronym and form some sort of movement around it. Hashtag not all of them, but a lot of them, and certainly the actual thought leaders that pioneered this acronym spreading into urban meccas, which has decimated unity within what was once called the LGBT or queer scene, but is now just a big mess of starving piranha infighting. See, As was plainly evident from reading the academic description that I just read, the label of QTPOC is openly adversarial to white people and goes so far as to invent false narratives about white, gay, and lesbian people being undeserving of whatever they might have as individuals or as communities. But of course, that's just one example from some fringe university in Arizona, so I bet it isn't considered all that woke to the QTPOC fam. So why don't we go straight to the source of where a huge portion of this stuff originated? Mia McKenzie, founder of the blog Black Girl Dangerous, which was a huge deal in the formational years of fourth wave intersectional feminism. I'm going to show this clip where she discussed racism within the QTPOC community with another person that actually seems fairly reasonable, at least in comparison to her.
That sets me and other queer South Asians and other folks who, don't have explicit sort of larger queer communities up for a lot of appropriation and a lot of like fucked up shit that we do. Whether that's appropriating Black queer culture or participating in things that aren't really, things that are for us, but viewing our person of colorness as sort of this mixed bag from which we can just...
Okay, so that wasn't an entirely bad notion to bring up. I mean, this video is from 2013, so the full regressive cancer hadn't entirely kicked in yet. That person seemingly just wanted to talk about the complexities of being a minority immigrant to a nation that has a fairly brutal history of colonialism and race relations or something. Fine. Let's see what Mia has to say in response to that.
This is really, that's the way, that's a Black vernacular, that's a way, that's very, very connected to Black culture and the ways that queer culture has just sort of taken as it will from Black culture without a lot of acknowledgement of Black culture, of it, just completely appropriated from it. And not only without acknowledgement of it, but without even really respect for it,
So, first things first, Mia has to double clarify that, yeah, queer and person of color definitely does mean Black as the dominant cultural force, at least to her, which, considering the fact that she is against things like appropriation, also means that she probably thinks that basically every other racial minority should not disrespect their Black leaders by stealing from them or something, as they should remember to know their place as non-Black, queer, and trans QTPOCs, or whatever.
Like a Black woman in the inner city saying something or dressing in a particular way, having a certain way of expressing herself. You can take that exact same expression and put it on a white gay man and it's so much more acceptable,
and marketable.
And marketable, exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, for me, like a lot of the ways that I see racism in POC community playing out is this sort of the appropriation of Blackness by everybody. And also,
now I know at this moment you're probably thinking to yourself, but aren't white gay men kind of annoying and don't they talk like Black girls a lot of the time? Well, no, not all of us, though the intersectional non-binary identified ones sure say yes and slay a lot on social media, I've noticed. So maybe you just hang out with the wrong types of white gay men if that's something that's bothering you. Here's the thing. People talk like who they are around. Get used to it. When I was growing up, going to school in a Black neighborhood, I had a lot of Black female friends, and I ended up kind of talking like them. If you don't want white gay men to talk like Black girls, don't hang out with them. Or talk more like a white girl or whatever would make you happy, if that's possible, which it clearly isn't. More so, What I'm saying here is that despite the fact that there's a lot of positivity within the quote-unquote QTPOC community, with music events that are probably perfectly fun if you are gay or trans and a racial minority, the thought leaders like McKenzie, who felt a need to actually define this category as an actual political label, are people who actively have a problem with white people. And, as it turns out, men in general as well, which is why you don't see as many males around them as maybe some people might have thought. That being said, I personally have no problem with creating events that are marketed to be for minority demographics. If you want to self-segregate and create events for yourself and people like you, I would be a massive hypocrite if I were to say that I have a problem with that, because I've been to countless events designed to be for gay men only, and they made me happy. But does this person seem happy to you when they talk about being QTPOC?
I would say that we need to shed some light on is how the non-binary representation is always a super skinny androgynous white person, and
masculine presenting white person typically.
Yeah, masculine presenting. And it's really hard to be non-binary and have hips and have the black features that I do have and other people of color have, can't hide those hips.
That seems like a perfectly nice person to me who is probably confused about their identity and how to fit into their social surroundings. My guess would be that this person didn't have a whole lot of friends for whatever reason, and then somehow gravitated towards the QTPOC crowd for whatever reason, because it looked like fun from the marketing on the internet. For whatever reason.
So let's jump right into our busy Saturday, starting with QTPOC Snack and Chat with Utopia Seattle. Now back in the back days, all the cool queers used to gather around for QTPOC dim sum to break bread, connect, and laugh.
However, once this person got to the QTPOC party, it turned out that everybody was super awkward and judgmental, and seemingly nobody really feels like they fit in, very likely because the entire premise is based around gender deconstructionist rejection of biology and racial resentment. So then they sat around in 2015 making YouTube videos where they honestly just sounded kind of miserable, which is sad to me because I have no reason to believe that this person has a bad bone in their body. But of course, it's not just the racial minorities that get sucked into the veritable cult of the Q-tips. There's all sorts of white people, usually trans, but not always, who end up feeling that it is their intersectional duty to actually force themselves to understand the QTPOC experience or whatever. And of course, they just end up sounding rather terrified to even have an opinion. Like as if that's a constructive place for anybody to find themselves in.
Just more on an intersectionality perspective, the fact that I like what Levi said in his video, how we need to look at this as a step back and you have to be an ally of people of color before you step in and be an ally of trans people of color. Just considering those two different things, but also going in on a classist perspective and many different intersections of our identities and how those play out in queer and trans spaces, which I just said a few minutes ago. Just looking at that, seeing how we can support, use our voices, try to bring up perspectives of trans men of color, because YouTube is pretty whitewashed, media is pretty whitewashed, so...
Here's the thing. I don't have a problem with people who want to do their own thing. If somebody wants to make a party for queer and trans black people, or queer and trans Asian people, or something that represents everybody who isn't white, that happens to be queer or trans or gay or whatever, they can go ahead and do that. In fact, I remember a time when I think that people did do that, and they didn't make it super political. at least not that I knew of. However, once it got to the point where people were creating mission statements like these and jumping on every opportunity they could to trash talk white gays and lesbians in a fairly obvious attempt to exert some sort of control over the LGBT demographic by creating a subset of aristocrat-like racial elites within the population, by spinning a narrative around oppression and subsequent inevitable entitlements, there was a problem. Yes, Mia McKenzie was very big on emphasizing that white people should be ordered around by black people, which you can verify for yourself if you do a Google search for Mia McKenzie, how to be an ally. You'll get a number of things, though she might try to make you buy her book. Sorry not sorry, Q-tips. White gay men don't owe you anything. Rich gay men don't owe you the money that they worked hard for, because they sure as hell weren't handed it on a silver platter in the corporate world or as lawyers, businessmen, or whatever the hell else procured them their wealth. Because even if white gay men inherited their wealth, parents don't just go ahead and hand their legacy over to their gay sons if they don't think he's hardworking, intelligent, capable, and respectable. Sure, maybe these problems in the corporate world between white gay men and white straight men are unfamiliar to you, and you absolutely don't have to understand just how difficult it can be for some white gay men to tell their rich and well-connected family that they are homosexual. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to understand, and you can stay in your lane. Just like I stay in mine when I don't demand or even attempt to go to events that weren't marketed to be for people like me. That's why I don't go to the QTPOC parties. Throw your little parties, do your thing, but don't expect to control us. Or we're gonna create an acronym of our own, maybe called GigTow or something, and leave your sorry ass so that you have to go back to begging for scraps from upper middle class white Unitarian church ladies or whatever, which is a lot more degrading than maybe it would have been if you just tried to make legitimately inclusive and non-politicized environments for gay, lesbian, and trans people. Like the ones we kind of used to have that I liked. I don't know, maybe those spaces were never going to get a lot of funding. But we'll never know, because you made it so that nobody's going to want to give any money to them.